Good afternoon. I'm Shawn, Benedict, Special Agent in charge of ATF's Washington Field Division. Let me begin by saying it's an honor to be here with Chief Newsom, Mayor Bowser, U.S. Attorneys Jesse Liu, and Zack Terwilliger. ATF is uniquely positioned as the primary federal agency tasked with investigating illegal firearms trafficking. There are far too many guns being recovered today in Washington, D.C. MPD has done an outstanding job getting illegal firearms out of our communities. It will take a collective effort to cut the flow of guns coming into the district. There's an obligation for responsible firearms ownership and an expectation that people will follow the law as it pertains to possession and transfer of guns. The message today is this: we're putting those on notice that the purchasing of firearms outside the city and illegally transferring those guns or trafficking those guns into the district will be aggressively investigated and prosecuted. For all those who think they can ignore the law and put innocent lives in danger, know this: we will find you and we will hold you accountable. It's time to disrupt the shooting cycle, time to stop the violence. At this time, I'd ask Chief Newsom to come up to make his remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Shawn. Good afternoon. I'm Peter Newsom. I'm the Chief of Police for the Metropolitan Police Department here in Washington, D.C. I want to thank you all for showing up here today. I'm very pleased to stand here with Mayor Bowser, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Jesse Liu, the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, Zack Terwilliger, and the Special Agent in charge of the ATF's Washington Field Office, Shawn Benedict. Each of us will outline some of our agency efforts to combat illegal gun trafficking in the Washington, D.C. area, but I think what is important is to highlight our collective approach and partnerships that work to make the city and our communities safe every single day. One of MPD's top priorities, in collaboration with the U.S. Attorney here in Washington, D.C., the U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia, and ATF, is to focus on resources on reducing violent gun crimes in the District of Columbia. This is, make no mistake about it, extremely dangerous and extremely difficult work for our officers. But we believe it is critical to saving lives by getting illegal guns off of our streets and out of the hands of violent offenders. In 2018, almost 80% of our homicides were gun-related. Out of the known offenders for 2018 homicides in the district, 93% of those offenders have an arrest history with an average of 10 arrests per offender. About half of the homicide offenders that were arrested in 2018 had prior gun arrests. I'm going to repeat that. Half of the people who were arrested for murder last year in the district had a prior gun arrest. We've all seen the devastating impact that illegal guns have on our community. A little less than a week ago, a mother in our city received the news that her 11-year-old son, Karan, had been killed, murdered by gun violence. Yeah, the suspect was arrested in that case, but that doesn't bring the 11-year-old Karan back. What we're seeing in the Washington, D.C. is an increasing number of shootings where a petty argument or disagreement occurs or someone feels disrespected, and rather than moving on, a readily available gun is introduced and someone ends up seriously injured or killed. Every single time someone's shot in the District of Columbia, it is tragic. And it's also completely unnecessary. That's why we believe one important component of our overall strategy to prevent gun violence must be to get these illegal firearms out of our community. Over the last 3 years, MPD officers have worked to get almost 6,000 illegal guns off the streets of the District of Columbia. So far this year, MPD officers have already recovered over 1,000 illegal firearms. Some of them you can see behind me today. That is a tremendous amount of guns. And I believe this, and I tell my officers all the time, our work will not be done until we get them all. Together with the U.S. Attorney and the ATF, we have investigated numerous cases and prosecuted multiple individuals who have possessed or brought guns illegally into the District of Columbia. Just like I feel an obligation to get every illegal gun, I feel the same obligation that we must hold every gun offender accountable. And I'm very thankful that my partners are here to support me in this effort. I'm now going to turn the podium over to Jesse Liu, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, to say a few words.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jesse Liu, and I'm the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. I'm honored to be here today with our partners from the Metropolitan Police Department, the Eastern District of Virginia, the ATF, and of course, Mayor Bowser, to discuss this very important issue, combating the illegal trafficking of firearms into the district. As highlighted by Chief Newsom, illicit firearms are present in most forms of violent crimes here in the city and increase the power of criminal individuals and groups. The identification and tracing of illegally manufactured and trafficked firearms is complex and requires a multi-agency and multi-jurisdictional response. Firearms make their way into the district in a variety of ways. Most firearms are produced legally and then diverted into the illegal market. They're frequently stolen and trafficked. Some unlicensed firearm sellers purchase firearms in one state, then transport them to their state of residence and sell, trade, or distribute the firearms, which can end up in the hands of those who commit crimes. Some prohibited purchasers, such as convicted felons, also use what we call straw purchasers, individuals who buy firearms on behalf of people who could not otherwise legally buy them themselves. Gun traffickers also have found ways to exploit the loopholes in federal law by purposefully purchasing guns through sales that do not require background checks or sale records. So how can we reduce the number of firearms-related incidents and keep guns out of the hands of those who should not have them? One effective strategy is to address the problem of unscrupulous gun dealers, stolen weapons, and illegal sales and purchases of firearms. We do this through increased information sharing and coordination with our federal and local law enforcement partners. This allows us to quickly identify specific incidents and trends, thereby enabling us to move in investigating and prosecuting these offenses in the most appropriate venue. Working side by side with our partners on this issue has allowed us to arrest and convict individuals involved in the illegal trafficking of firearms. As recently as this past April, Isaiah Green of Washington was sentenced to 50 months in prison for his role in drug trafficking schemes in which he also illegally trafficked more than 30 guns. Stephan Jeter of Washington was sentenced to 63 months for his role in a multi-state firearms trafficking conspiracy in which 25 firearms were recovered. And these are just a few examples of the work that we're doing in this area. We'll also continue to aggressively prosecute those who commit criminal offenses using firearms, those who illegally traffic in firearms, and those who illegally possess firearms in our city. For instance, in February of this year, we announced a new approach to felon in possession cases that leverages the resources of our federal and local partners working together to look for additional ways to more effectively address the issue of gun violence. The correlation between the availability and use of illegal guns and violent crime is undeniable, and we will continue to work closely with our partners in the law enforcement community in the promotion of public safety and the pursuit of justice. Our message to those who traffic in illegal firearms is that you will be found and you will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. With that, I would like to turn the podium over to my colleague across the river, United States Attorney Zack Terwilliger of the Eastern District of Virginia. Zack.
Thank you very much, U.S. Attorney Liu. As she just mentioned, my name is Zack Terwilliger, and I'm the United States Attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia, which is just across the Potomac in Alexandria, stretches down to Richmond, and covers the Tidewater area. I want to thank you all of the press for being here. It's something that I heard Eddie Johnson, the superintendent in Chicago, say. I just so appreciate that you all are paying attention to this gun violence issue. I appreciate you being here. Thank you to my colleague and friend, Jesse Liu, who've worked together over the last 2.5 years. My old friend, Special Agent in Charge of Shawn Benedict. We both were much more junior in our careers when we first started working together. My new friend, Chief Newsom, and it was incredible to meet Mayor Bowser today for the first time. This is very personal for me. I cut my teeth as a prosecutor, prosecuting these cases. So I know what a difference it makes when we get aggressive when it comes to straw cutting, going after straw purchasers, and those who are prohibited in possessing firearms. So what do I mean by that? Let me just put it in its simplest terms. We're prosecuting those who buy guns for other people. Sometimes those other people are prohibited. Sometimes those other people just don't want a gun associated with them. We're also prosecuting those people who use false addresses. Maybe at one point they lived in the Commonwealth of Virginia and they have an old ID, or they've moved to Maryland, or they've moved to D.C. and they're coming back to purchase guns. That, lying on the federal firearms form, is a felony, and we're prosecuting it. And then those who leave D.C., go meet with somebody in Virginia to purchase a firearm, that's called a straw purchase, and we're going after them. In addition, we're also aggressively pursuing all those who possess a firearm who are prohibited from doing so. You're most familiar with a felon in possession, so that's someone who's been convicted of a felony. But there's many more prohibitors, such as illegal aliens who are in possession of firearms, those who have convictions for misdemeanor crimes of domestic violence. That makes you a prohibited person. Those who are drug users in possession of a firearm, that's a felony. And finally, we're also using the serious enhancements that go along with being an armed drug trafficker and an armed violent criminal. Immediately upon becoming U.S. Attorney about a year ago in the Eastern District of Virginia, I met with my colleagues at ATF, and I made it a priority, mission one, that we clamp down on the gun trafficking that's occurring in the DMV area, District, Maryland, and Virginia. And through their use of NIBIN, the Nationally Integrated Ballistic Information Network, which is the tracing of shell casings, and something called E-Trace, which traces the purchase history of a firearm, we're going literally gangbusters on these guys. So let me be very clear about what it is we're saying. If you purchase a firearm in Virginia for someone else, or you reside in D.C. and use a false Virginia address, we will prosecute you, and it's a felony. If you do this once to make some extra cash or help out a friend, we will hold you accountable. The trafficking of illegally obtained firearms creates tremendous risk for violence, and it presents a serious danger to our communities and the law enforcement officers who are charged with keeping us safe. Under the Department of Justice's signature anti-violent crime program, the Project Safe Neighborhood program, our office, along with the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office, is not only prioritizing these offenses, but we are coordinating like never before. Let me give you an example. You're out, Chief Newsom's patrol officers are out, they make a car stop, they recover an illegal gun. Now, through the use of ATF techniques, we are able to trace back to the original purchaser of that gun. If that person is in the Eastern District of Virginia, I'm coordinating with U.S. Attorney Liu, and we're making sure the case does just not stop in D.C., that it's tracing its roots and its tentacles back to Virginia. This aggressive approach has been paying dividends across the river in the Eastern District of Virginia, where we've had a 14% decrease in homicides across the Commonwealth of Virginia, I should say, last year. It's a huge step in the right direction, and I'm committed to working together to apprehend and hold those accountable gun traffickers who are bringing firearms into your communities. With that, I would love to turn things over to Mayor Bowser.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for being here. I am pleased to be here to talk about our federal partnership between the District of Columbia and our federal partners to rid our streets of illegal guns. Sadly, I've been on the scene of too many incidents of violent crime. You heard the chief already talk about where we were last Thursday on the scene of an 11-year-old shot down in his neighborhood with an illegal gun. Too many times on those scenes, there's frequently the same question. How are these guns coming into our neighborhoods? We don't make guns in D.C. How are all of these guns on our streets? So what you have heard today is our focus on how we prevent guns from coming into our neighborhoods and making sure we are holding people accountable who are breaking the law, whether that's purchasing a gun illegally, transferring a gun illegally, or possessing a gun illegally, or using a gun on our streets. I want to say with a clear voice that all that we have seen is unacceptable, and we will use every tool in our toolbox and look for more to keep our neighborhoods safer. Our partners have talked about our work, our challenges, and our successes. You see, and you've heard the chief talk about this year already retrieving 1,000 guns. And sadly, we know, or we certainly suspect, that we pick up one gun and it's too easy for a would-be criminal to go and get another one. So there is a great deal of work for us to do to stop the flow of illegal guns into our city. We know, for example, that when MPD, ATF, our Department of Forensic Sciences, and I want to acknowledge Dr. Jennifer Smith, who is with us, work hand in hand together, we can make sure that any gun used illegally in our city, we're using all of the data and information flows that have been described to find out where that gun came from. I want to reiterate what you've also heard, because we don't want any resident to be a part of this criminal chain of possession of an illegal gun. And if someone is asking you to help them obtain a gun, you want to think real long and hard and make sure you don't do that. What you've heard is that is a straw purchase, and a straw purchase is a felony, and we are seeking the assistance of the U.S. Attorney, both in the district and in the Eastern Division of Virginia, to make sure everyone is accountable for their actions. We also want families to know, as you've heard me say earlier in the week, that we need your assistance to find out where illegal guns are in your home, in your neighborhood, among your acquaintances. MPD offers rewards up to $2,500 for information on the location of illegal guns. Residents can turn in illegal guns to their local MPD station, immune from prosecution for the possession of that gun. Finally, the Superior Court is finalizing its internal system for moving forward on the Extreme Risk Protection Order program, sometimes referred to as the red flag laws. But we also know that taking illegal guns off the streets isn't the only thing that we have to focus on to keep our streets safer. We not only have law enforcement initiatives that we're pushing, but also opportunity and crime prevention programs, including our Office of Neighborhood Safety, our Department of Employment Services, our trauma-informed care centers, so many ways that people can ask for help. We also run the Office of Victim Services that will focus on communities with the highest level of gun violence to offer trauma services. So hopefully, if somebody that you know is carrying a gun, you know is in a desperate situation and needs help, you will reach out to any one of these service offices. So with that, with my colleagues, we'll answer your questions on this initiative. Questions? Mark?
So, Ms. Liu, I have some questions for you specifically.
Okay.
You had mentioned the February press conference where you stood with Mayor Bowser and Chief Newsom and talked about the felony and possession cases, and you mentioned it here today. How many of those cases there have been? The district is on track to make double the amount of arrests in that category this year that they did last year. How many of those cases have you moved to federal court since February? You made the announcement that you were going to.
I just want to be cautious about the term moved. I can tell you how many cases have been indicted in federal court. That's 65 since February 1st of this year. I'm not sure that I want to use the verb moved, but I can tell you how many cases were charged in federal court, and we are continuing that effort with our partners, both from the Metropolitan Police Department and our federal partners as well.
And then of the total number of gun arrests in the district so far this year, can you tell us how many of those gun arrests actually ended up in prosecutions or how many were no papered?
I don't have those numbers for you.
I've been asking your office for these numbers for some time, and I've been asking the mayor's office and MPD, why can't we get that simple type of data? The other day, Chief Newsom complained about the community not doing a good enough job, your community of law enforcement not doing a good enough job in affecting change of behavior through prosecutions. When Chief Lanier left in 2016, she said your office was dropping the ball on prosecuting a lot of the cases, and it frustrated. Mayor Bowser stood on the steps of MPD and agreed that your office is not accountable to the citizens of D.C. or to her. So why can't you tell us how many of those cases that have been that there have been gun arrests have been prosecuted?
Standing here right now, I don't have those numbers for you, and I'm not going to give you any numbers that I'm not absolutely accurate about. I will say that I think we have an excellent relationship with Mayor Bowser's office and with the Metropolitan Police Department, and I think we have a fantastic working relationship.
What about the cases that aren't getting prosecuted? I mean, do you have any ballpark figure, any percentage? Is anybody up here?
She just told you, answer that question, Mark. We'll get you some definitive
Do you feel
numbers.
the same, Mayor Bowser, that you said in 2016 that the U.S. Attorney's Office is not accountable?
I feel that we have been very aggressive about our partnership and focusing on the things that are going to keep the district safer. And you've heard me and the chief time and time again talk about the prevalence of illegal guns. You've heard it in communities, people asking where are the guns coming from. And what we are here to talk about with the ATF, and I want to thank Special Agent Benedict for his focus and commitment to work with us to find out, literally, if we have a street crime, if you find a gun in a gun stop, in a car stop, where did the gun come from? And that is the commitment we have today from our federal partners to track down a gun used in our city. Where did it come from? And that is going to help us, we think, with prevention efforts. Yes.
You mentioned 14% down in homicides in Virginia. Have you seen any positive change in numbers since this federal partnership in D.C.? Is there a way to track the effect? And have you been tracking it and seen any difference so far in either the number of guns coming through straw purchasers in Virginia or just the number of guns being picked up on the street?
The number of guns, I'm going to ask the chief to talk to, just looking at so far this year compared to last year, we're up in the number of guns that we have recovered.
Yeah, so we have, like the mayor said, we have recovered more guns this year than we had last year. With regards to any results that we might see from a shift in the prosecutions, I think that remains to be seen. That's not something that's going to happen overnight, and I think when we spoke in February, that's what we had told folks.
Chief, a question about these. This is all from 1 year?
I'm not sure if these are all from 1 year, but these are examples of the types of weapons that we have taken off the street in the District of Columbia. If you see some of these weapons, some of them are pretty terrifying. Most of them can shoot multiple rounds. Some of them can fire rounds at a very high capacity. When you look at the assault weapons that have been recovered in the District of Columbia, I think it gives folks an example of the types of things. The types of weapons that are being utilized on our streets. I also want to say that I couldn't be more pleased that the U.S. attorneys, both from here in the district and from the Eastern District of Virginia, have showed up here today to voice their commitment to particularly focus on trafficking and straw purchases. We've said it over and over again that the District of Columbia, we don't manufacture firearms here in the district, and the mayor was exactly right. Whenever I go to a community meeting, when we do have an uptick in violence in the city and we're talking about gun violence, I get a question every single time from somebody in the community who asks us, what are we doing about stopping the flow of guns into the district? And to hear this from our partners at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I think is everything. It's something that everyone should be happy about.
Could you tell us about this chart you have here with the numbers? 35% from Virginia, 11% from...
Yeah, those are the source states of weapons into the District of Columbia.
You look at them and figure that out once you confiscate them?
ATF shares that data with us. So they trace all of the guns to see where they came from, and then they share that data with us.
So every gun is processed is sent to ATF? Is that how it works?
We send information on every gun. We share information with every gun that we recover with ATF, and they will trace that gun, and then they'll, if they can, they'll identify the source state.
Chief, can you talk about the prosecution? You've had almost 700 gun arrests this year. Are you satisfied with the number of those arrests that end up in prosecutions?
You know what? I heard you making some comments about what people had said and insinuated. I think you may have mischaracterized some of the things that have been said. We have a tremendous working relationship with our U.S. Attorney, with our other criminal justice partners. We're going to continue to do, and the Metropolitan Police Department is one one small piece of the criminal justice system. We're going to continue to do what we need to do to get these illegal guns off the street, to find these violent offenders, to hold them accountable. And I am certain that the folks that are standing behind me here today are going to help us with that.
Are you satisfied with the number of prosecutions?
I don't have the numbers in front of me either. I can tell you that prosecuting gun crimes in the District of Columbia is an extremely difficult challenge, and that's probably a good thing, because when you are going to charge a criminal or convict somebody of a criminal case anywhere, you're going to take away their freedom. So you have to have protections in place to make sure that those folks get all the rights that they deserve. And that can be an extremely difficult process. And to the extent that cases are not going through the system, it indicates, I think, to all of the criminal justice partners who touch it, that we all got to do a better job.
Yes.
If 11%, is this from last year, or what year is this?
I think that's last year's data. Yes.
Why is Maryland not part of this?
It is.
Right there.
No, it's on the chart. Why is it not part of this partnership if 11% of the guns are coming from Maryland?
We didn't. Did we ask Maryland? We didn't ask Maryland. No.
We think that our most intense, we think an intense focus from Virginia is going to yield the most, to be honest with you. Yes.
Mayor, can I just address
Yeah,
that
sure.
as well? Yeah. So Rob Herr, who's the U.S. Attorney in Maryland, who happens to be both a colleague and a good friend of both Jesse Liu and I, it's not his fault that he's not here. And what we're focused on, frankly, is what you see on the chart behind you. And the thing I should mention, and I think you need to understand this about your chief of police and your special agent in charge, Shawn Benedict. I'm going to use an acronym, but I'm going to explain it. There's something called the Crime Gun Intelligence System, CGIC, and it basically is the tracing of firearms combined with shell casings and NIBIN. And there's actually a governing board for this model, and your chief and this special agent in charge are both on it. So this literally is 21st century science. This is as good as it gets. We are pushing the bounds to try to use science to get after this and get out there and cut leads and catch and what we call it is disrupting the shooting cycle. Because if we can arrest people with illegal guns, we don't know how many shootings we'll prevent. So the whole notion behind all of us standing here is a commitment that we are going to use community partnerships. We're going to use our 21st century law enforcement techniques. We're going to use science to get after this and hopefully make it extremely hard for individuals to get guns. And that's our commitment. The other thing that I want to mention is to the extent there are individuals in the community who are bringing these guns in and have looked the other way. Some ways you may see these items as innocuous. Maybe it's not like people moving fentanyl or cocaine where you're going to call someone. But I have to believe there are family members, there are friends, there are employers that know people are making runs over to Virginia to try to get guns. Or there's that friend, there's that cousin who you know has been doing this to make extra money and thinks of it as just helping out another friend. Please speak up. Please speak up, because as long as you have people who are willing to go in and commit a felony to buy these guns with their own IDs, it's going to be incredibly hard. So we do need your help.
Okay, last question.
Actually, for Chief Newsom, you mentioned the other day at the press conference, you had some pretty sharp criticisms for what you feel are fairly weak punishments for current gun offenses. And I'm just wondering if you feel empowered by your law enforcement partners to push for harsher penalties. And if so, what sort of conversations are happening behind the scenes, and what exactly are the additional penalties you'd like to see reached?
What I would like to see is when we do arrest somebody and convict somebody for illegal firearm possession in the District of Columbia, that the consequences for that behavior changes the behavior so they don't do it again. And I think a lot of the data that we have indicates that's not happening. When you talk about last year, 50% of the people that we arrested for homicide had a prior gun arrest. I think the consequences for having that gun the first time didn't change behavior, because they picked up a gun and they've gone out and they've killed somebody. Consequences come in a lot of different forms. So I think all of our criminal justice partners have to put their heads together to decide what's the right approach to these folks who are picking up the guns. Because I think the people who are picking up the guns the first time is a prerequisite to future violent behavior. That's at least what the data suggests to me. So when we do get them the first time, we got to treat those cases. And what I'm hearing today is that I have partners that are willing to do this. Treat those very seriously, put our best effort forward to ensure that we get good prosecutions, good convictions, and then we need to put our heads together and decide what are the consequences that are going to ensure, before we allow that person back out into the community, that they're not going to do it again. Because, you stand on the scene, like the mayor said, of a young boy who's been killed. That's something you will remember for the rest of your life. And that's just a small piece of what that family feels. I know many of a family who have lost their children to gun violence in our city. That devastates that family forever. And that's why we're all very passionate about this. And like I said, I want to go back to, to hear from our colleague in Virginia to come out here to Washington, D.C., and for him to say he's going to put his best foot forward to ensure that people are held accountable. And he not only did that, but he also shared a warning for anyone who might be involved in this behavior and not think that it's serious. He warned them and said, listen, there's not going to be any first chances on this. If you go to the state of Virginia, you purchase a firearm with the intent of giving it to somebody else, you're going to be held accountable.
Thank you.
I got multiple questions going at the same time.
We have
Can
a
you
question.
give any
Hold on,
specific
Mark.
examples?
This young man needs to get his question in.
Newsom.
Good,
This
how are
is
you?
both for you and Mayor Bowser. I know on July 14th, there is an incident outside of the Hilton on Connecticut Avenue in Northwest where about 10 to 12 juveniles were attacking an individual. I know MPD is asking for the public's help to try to find some of these juveniles. However, that video that was released 11 days, almost 2 weeks after the fact. My question is, why did it take so long for that video to be released? I know MPD is looking for the help of the public. Wouldn't it be a little more difficult for the public to help if we have to wait 2 weeks for that video?
Out of respect for my federal partners' time, I want to come after this, and I'll come aside and we can talk about that. Yeah.
My question, just to follow up, are there any states that you feel are doing particularly well when it comes to penalizing gun offenders, or is there a model?
Change in behavior. You keep saying penalizing. We need consequences that change behavior. So that is something we should probably look into and see what approach is working, if it's working in a different jurisdiction. That's a good question.
Chief, can you provide specific examples of people who have been arrested for murder, who were previously arrested on lesser gun charges and then released? You keep throwing these statistics out. Are there a couple of names of
I can't do your research for you, Mark. But if you're willing to do it, you send a FOIA. We'll provide you with the information to the extent that we can.
This is something we have to FOIA in order to get. From
I think that if you want to get a comprehensive look and you want to check the statistics that I'm sharing, I think that would be the best approach.
Mr. Terwilliger, another question for you, sir. So you mentioned the success that you're having in Virginia with reducing homicides through your efforts, but you see the chart behind you with a third of the guns that are creating the havoc here in D.C. come from your jurisdictions, and the homicide rate is going up on this side of the river. What do you say to the residents of the District of Columbia who are sitting and it's going to see that chart and say, this is where the guns are coming from? Why does it take this, the death of an 11-year-old, to make to start to do something?
Well, I don't. I guess if I'm in the court of law, what I would say is, I don't agree with the premise of your question. This has been a priority of our office and our district for many years. We're the home of Project Exile. Which fundamentally changed Richmond, Virginia. We're the home of Project Safe Neighborhood. So we've been doing this for a long time. I was more than willing to stand up here today and take questions such as that from you, because I feel like there is a way we can help. As we know, firearms don't go off on their own. They're generally in the hands of somebody who pulls the trigger. But rather than hide behind my desk, I wanted to be here today and explain to you I take this very seriously. I think we can be part of the solution. I want to be part of the solution. We're going to get continually aggressive. We have been aggressive. This is something that started a year ago, and we're going to continue it. And we're just at a point where we wanted to go overt and tell the public. And I think the public has a right to know, okay, what are your folks doing? At the end of the day, I work for the taxpayers as well. So I'm proud to be here and show publicly something that we've been doing behind the scenes since I got on the job 14 months ago.
Thank you, Attorney. Okay, thank you, and they'll have a separate kind of local gaggle to my left in 1 minute.